started over 20 years ago, and Roger was enthusiastic. He wished me to concentrate only on that, so as to keep updating the Auroville community of the latest progress of contemporary architecture. When I started with a general presentation of the major trends of architecture and outstanding buildings. But as years passed by, I started changing the focus, and this became particularly obvious in the previous exhibition that I put up, always here at the Tanola, on Milan futuristic architecture, because the focus was no longer on these magnificent buildings, which the first one, seeing them the supermind, in fact, was Kiri Joshi when I put up my first exhibition on high-tech. But I realized that the point was not the beauty of the buildings and the magnificent, even also in terms of engineering, but it was the surrounding. And it could no longer be, as in all my previous exhibition, where these buildings could be put anywhere, because what counted was the building. It was not so. The building was strictly linked to each other, and they were linked to the surrounding and to nature, and to this experiment which was happening again, returning the cities to the green space that they were in the past. In fact, there was a library of trees inside the building, classifying 1,500 trees, and outside this public park. And of course, it was only for pedestrian and cyclists, and there was absolutely no car, nothing. And given the iconic beauty of the building, that was my favorite place in Milano, where I came back after 40 years. But given the history of Milano, where I grew up, nothing surprised me. I found it was normal to see out of the blue these kind of things. But when I started putting up this exhibition, which, like the previous one, was a restructuration, but the difference between the previous one was that the focus of the previous one was mainly on public buildings and offices and towers. And there were also residences, but on the background. In this case, it was a mixture of these 3 towers and 2 residential complexes, and that's why it's called CityLife. And this is what made all the difference. Also, while in the case of Porta Nuova, there were these great architects coming and building, but without linking to each other. In this case, it was 2 Pritzker Prize and the third one equally famous, who came together, Zaha Hadid, Daniel Libeskind, and Arata Isozaki, planning together what is in fact one of the largest car-free zones of Europe, the largest public park privately funded of Europe, one of the largest shopping malls of Europe, and without one single car, not even a moped can be seen. It's only for pedestrian and cyclists. And the park is not just a park, but there are also garden orchards and even poultries, and this can be seen at the feet of these gigantic skyscrapers. One is the tallest of Italy, and the 2 residential settlements. So, and on top, inside the tallest skyscraper of Italy, which is 208 meters plus the antenna, the whole is occupied by what is called the hanging forest, which are boughs this height with trees. So I realized that it's not only the habitat, as you can see here with the weaving the shapes of Zaha Hadid. She started as a deconstructivist, but then she developed this kind of style, and even inside she did design the furniture. So it's no longer the green and the beauty and the concept of feeling and health cities is not just for rich residents, but it's also for the general public and is even for the employees. So now you can have an idea. So I started displaying 5 panels with Zaha Hadid because she died a few years ago, quite young compared to the age of an architect. They can live over 100 years old. And she's probably the most influential architect of the age. And you can see the stunning design, and she's everything. The other 3 also, they are not only architects, they are town planners, they are engineers. In fact, she started as a mathematician, they are designers. And here you can see what the 3 of them, which is kind of a miracle to have people of this caliber coming together and working out a master plan at that level. You can see here, because over 50% is green area, and all the cars stop outside. Because under these 3 skyscrapers, there is a second level, which is occupied by the shopping mall, which was also designed by Zaha Hadid. It's all made with bamboo with resins. The walls, the floor, the counters, everything is bamboo. So underground the 3 towers, you see the mall, and there is a museum, there are sport facilities. And then under the second level, underground, there is the driverless metro and the parking for 7,000 cars. And even the 2 residences, Zaha Hadid and we'll see later, Libeskind, also have the parking underground. So you can only see pedestrian and some rare cycles. All that I've displayed in the exhibition is real. I mean, of course, there are maps, and some things have been downloaded by internet because I came in 2019, so I took the photographs, but some things were not completed. In the meantime, they got completed. So all that you see is real, with one exception, this, which in fact is a perfect representation of what the real line of force that Roger planned for the galaxy and give the dynamism proper of the galaxy is. So they started building them in December. In fact, it's a very famous brand from Denmark, Big. They were asked to build 2 more skyscrapers, in addition to the 3. Instead, they presented this project, which was immediately accepted. So for us, it's very important, because when Roger talks about line of force, you can see what he means. You have an idea when I told you that there is a ground level, the 3 towers, and the residential settlements. Here you see one of Daniel Libeskind. Then underground, there is the second level, which is the commercial center, and here you see the entrance. Again, there are more maps where you can see with more detail the residences, the towers, but just remember that whatever you see is car-free. At the beginning, I show you the part of Zaha Hadid. So the 3 skyscrapers have 3 special names, because in the case of Zaha Hadid, it's a kind of vortex. Well, this one is straight, but the peculiarity of this skyscraper is that it's very thin. So it was built by Arata Isozaki, Pritzker Prize, like Zaha Hadid. And in collaboration with an Italian architect, Andrea Maffei, who started together with Arata Isozaki, the Isozaki company in Italy. So the builder is a group which is since several decades the major engineering company in the world. Here you can see that outside the towers there is the public park. Because when the municipality of Milan gives the license to restructure a zone, puts condition, so there is a lot of public things, and parks and parking are part of this condition. So imagine the importance of having children growing up since very small with this concept of architecture and planning, which, by the way, but I'll talk about this afterwards, was the way I myself grew up. Here you can see the children and the families playing, but what is interesting in this, which is the tallest skyscraper of Italy, and is for 3,000 employees, that the wall has these walls with the trees. So this is part of the whole concept of city life, is to reintroduce the sense of nature and green in the old district. And we'll see afterwards how far they went at this level. Fermati passo a Libeskind. Here you see the third tower, which is called the Curve, and you can see why. And the reason why it is curved like this is because the three architects are aware of Milano history and the presence of Leonardo, and particularly Libeskind conceived a curved skyscraper because ideally the piazza, where the three towers stands, in his imagination should have been curved, like Leonardo's piazzas. So another strange things happened to Libeskind, because while Isozaki and Zaha Hadid were also designers, Libeskind was not. But in Milano, when he started conceiving this plan, he turned himself also into a designer, to the extent that he found his own design company settled in Milano, headed by his wife, and asking his son to resign to join the company. And here you can see what happens at the feet of the towers and the residences. Not only there are gardens, but there are orchard gardens. And here are the residences by Libeskind. Libeskind is a pure deconstructivist, has always been, is one of the major masters of deconstructivism. So everything sharp angles, not curves, like Zaha did. But what his residences and those of Zaha Hadid have in common is the courtyards. So all the buildings are arranged around the courtyards because this is the tradition of Milan. We will see after what I mean. This CityLife was created on the site of the International Milano Fiera. After shifting the site of Milan International Fair, which was a major event, and due to the traffic it generated, could no longer be in so central position. So this is the only building which was kept, and is one of the major convention halls of Europe for 18,000 people. The roof that you see was added afterwards, and these all photovoltaic cells that can also be converted into solar, and it gives powers to the whole complex for 18,000 people plus the surroundings. Outside the building, you can see the peculiarity of city life. So, while in the Porta Nuova, in the restructuration of the Porta Nuova district, the emphasis is on the library of trees, classifying the trees, and outside there is this public garden with sport facility, gymnic facilities, picnic, and wildflowers and wild grasses, even grasses grown like this. Here, the emphasis is in garden orchards, alternated with flowers, and also chicken. As you can see here, see the ranges of, and here you see the chicken, and behind there are the 3 skyscrapers. At this point, seeing the chicken, that in myself a major shift happening. Because I've been championing for the galaxy and the town all these years, but at the same time I could understand what for the ordinary people usually town means. It's something squalid, horrible, the cement boxes. And there was this dichotomy. I knew that the city was not that. So I never did before. I started doing printout of the photographs I took of the street and the neighborhood where I lived, which is this. And this started making the change in the people. They could see that cities, in fact, can be very beautiful, even magnificent, and green. Because this started with the villas at the end of the 19th century, attached to the Sempione Park, and even walking from this neighborhood to the Sempione Park, everything is green. And then, when I took the photographs, I never bothered to know what this was, and then I started looking internet, and I discovered that this was a kind of review of history of architecture. In fact, you go, first of all, it is a 10 minutes walk from Leonardo house and the famous Last Supper by Leonardo. And on the other side is 5 minutes walk from the Sempione Park and the Sforza Castle and the museum and everything. But in between you have all these buildings which range from the very elegant Art Nouveau buildings like this, modern rationalism during the fascist age. Mussolini never bothered about and never interfered. So the architecture of these years could be magnificent. Then you see how green they are. And then there is this skyscraper, which is 75 years old, perfectly preserved, in the same street where I live. But you can see here, see the Art Nouveau building with the skyscraper. And behind you see the green, you go to the park. So everything was together. These elegant buildings, the skyscraper, the trees, the park, everything. And this is the Sempione Park, where I used to play every day. And when people started entering the place, the first thing they were seeing, even before being fascinated as they were by Zaha Hadid, was this. And this is the very center of Milano. And Milano is a metropolis. The historical Milano is 1.5 million, but then it grows to 3 million with the outer parts. And it goes in habitat up to Switzerland. So imagine as a child, I grew up seeing this every day. And so for me, the city was something magnificent. And I understood it was absolutely normal that the mother wanted also something magnificent. The mother also talks of Paris like this and the park, where she also kept going to the park. Here you see the castle. Oh, by the way, you can already see here, castle with white flowers. You see with poppies and fleur de lis, the same flowers that are in Porta Nuova district. See, of course, this is springtime. So, and it is an English type park, the romantic type. So you don't see bad flowers. There are trees and bushes blossoming, and then there are body waters. And this is very important because, by the way, this is the concept of Leonardo, and as we are going to see, of Roger, the body water. And you see these huge, majestic trees, fountain with turtles. And the park is like this. It was embellished afterwards by Napoleon. And on one side, Napoleon built the famous Arch of Peace, which you remember the one in Paris. But on the other side, he built this semicircle, and we are going to see afterwards. It's very interesting because if you look inside the semicircle, the houses have courtyards with huge trees. And even where I lived, which was a house of 1911, there were 2 courtyards, and I lived in the inner one where there was a wild cherry tree, which was three stories high, and sycamores. So this shows that the towns have always been green. So the massacre commenced with the Industrial Revolution and national capitalism. So the reason why towns are hated now is because for something like 150 years they kept building in that way. And it got even worse after the Second World War, so that the towns were heavily bombarded. They had to be rebuilt very fast, and then they started building these things. But now, we are going back to the old concept of town, with green courtyard, with orchards, even inside the town itself. And not just for the rich, in fact for the poor, precisely when you don't have much money, the ideal thing is that you have your own little garden, your vegetable, if you can, eventually some chicken, as they used to live. This panel I added, apart from this, see, this is the famous vertical forest. I took this photograph, and you see the car. Because when you see the old center of Milano, you hardly see any car. First of all, because of the fantastic common transport, and the most popular are the tram, as you can see here. And moreover, there are a lot of taxation impediments, so people are discouraged from taking the car, and they never come from outside Milano because you have to pay such a fee to enter with a car that nobody comes. Now, here there is something very interesting, which in fact would be perfect for us in Auroville. Because Roger and the mother said very clear, not one single car inside Auroville. So, apart from bicycle and walking, we also need collective transport. So, not only Milano, but all over Europe, the favorite transport, apart the underground, of course, are the trams. But Italy is also famous for design. So an Italian designer, because of the COVID, came up with this model. Now you see how sleek it is. And as it is a tram, you can have several carriages. So the ideal thing would be that Prime Minister Modi gets a license and start producing this for Auroville and for the 96 smart towns to which he's providing funds. Below, I have added something else, which is attached to CityLife. There is a pedestrian path. Now we go back to the concept of of line of force. I've shown the one which they are building now, which is curved like this and empty. Another possibility is this. In any way, a line of force as a long uninterrupted roof cannot be a mixture of towers of decreasing height, as the line of goodwill wants to be, because this would destroy irremediably the dynamism of the galaxy, which is given by the line of force. And that's why I put it here for everybody to see. I added this panel effect on request of an Aurovillian who is farming. In fact, it's a very famous farm in Auroville. This is the story of the green cities. I should start, in fact, from the Roman, but it was a last-minute addition. There was no space. But it was Pietro, the photographer, who told me that, reminded me, in fact, that the Roman already had courtyards, and not only for the nobles, but even for the ordinary population, for orchards, chicken, same thing as I've shown there. So this is the only photograph which doesn't relate to Milano, but is very interesting. This is the municipal palace in Siena, nearby Florence. It's an enormous hall with frescoes of Lorenzetti, 1338, which is called the bad effects of the bad governance and the good governance. So you see a typical medieval cities with very narrow buildings. And when you have the bad governance, and you see the table, the country outside, the cities are very small, so they're practically attached to the country, is all burned out. And nothing grows. But with the good governance, the country flourishes and the people are happy and dance in the street. So this was to introduce the rest of the panel. So here we have, it's a beauty. I could not display the interior. The interior is magnificent, the furniture is magnificent. This is the royal villa with a park, which is the same as the Sempione Park, is the English type, so with huge trees and body water and so on. The villa itself now is a major museum and pinacothèque. Opposite to this villa is the first public park of Europe, paid again by the Empress of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was immediately a great success. They started replicating, and 1 century later, we had in Milano the second public park, which is the Sempione Park I've already shown. Now, going back, all this is to show the history of the green in the cities. What you see here is the piazza, where is the school, where I went as a child. And here you see the courtyards in Milano, very famous because they were fantastic palaces. And these two lines are with palaces. But the two lines below are the popular courtyards, which are as green as the other. So it was normal, even for the ordinary population, people without money, to care or for green. And in this case, you don't even see the orchard, you just see the plants, the wisteria, for example. This is the very famous Milano Cathedral. In fact, it could be an allegory of the galaxy and Mother's Town, because they started at the end of the 13th century, and it was completed only at the end of the 19th century, because even finally they completed the building, but they kept adding the statues. So you see what is attached to the cathedral, a pink and white magnolia. And this leads to the vertical forest, which is part of the Porta Nuova restructuration. In 2014, when it was completed, it was awarded as a major international prize, and is the beginning of a series of skyscrapers like this, by Boeri, but also other people imitating the same thing all over the world. In the case of Boeri, of this skyscraper, it took 1.5 years for botanists to study exactly what plant and trees and blossoming trees could fit there. And it's very important also as bioclimatic thing. See, and what you see pink are peach trees. This is also the Porta Nuova restructuration. You can see the vertical forest. And now you can see, beside the vertical forest, the other skyscrapers. And you see the trees and the white flowers. See? This, with the spire, is the tallest skyscraper of Italy. Without the spire, is the one of CityLife. Again, you see, this is always Porta Nuova. You see all the space occupied by the green. You see the emphasis on wildflower. They are not ornamental flowers, they are wildflowers and wild grasses planted here. And this skyscraper, which has recently been completed, so I could download from internet, you see what is planted inside? This is not for residences. These are offices. So for the light of the employees, they are garland of plants. And this also was new. In 2019, I could not take this picture. This green roof has been added now. Now you see the tallest skyscraper. And these also are offices. So you understand there is a complete revolution, not only the way we live, but the way we work. This should have been Auroville. The mother was also very emphatic also about the working places. Not only she said that the industrial zone, which in fact is the economic zone, must have the same beauty and green than the other zones, but she even wanted a completely different concept of working. All this, finally, at the end of the exhibition, took me back to Leonardo, because as CityLife has been planned by these three great, Zaha Hadid, Libeskind, and Isozaki, with the awareness of the history of Milano and the awareness of the presence of Leonardo in Milano, finally, I was a little slow to get it. Now you see what Leonardo conceived in Milano. So this is the last panel. And you see, this is Leonardo, 3 levels down, together with the galaxy. And together with text of Roger, not on the galaxy, but on the second town that the mother called the town of the future. and I'll explain you why. First of all, there is a quote here of Setna Amalkiran, was the ashramite to whom Aurobindo forwarded whatever new he was writing on Savitri, forwarded to him for feedback. He even said about him that his poetry came from the other mind. So Setna said that he got it from Aurobindo, that his previous incarnations were Caesar Augustus, the great Roman emperor, and Leonardo. This to me is the key to the galaxy. So everybody knows Polymath Leonardo for his paintings, his drawings, as a scientist, but not much known is that he was also a town planner, an inventor, a technician. So when he presented, he wrote to the future Duke of Milan, who at the time was a condottiero, a military general, offering his services. He didn't wrote, I'm such a great artist, apart from the fact he was only 30. He said, I am an hydraulic engineer. I can build the machine walls. And he was called. After a few months, he was called. The Black Death, the plague, killed 1/3 of Milano population. So Leonardo conceived an ideal city as an answer to the plague, overthrowing completely the medieval concept with narrow streets, damp building. He wanted a city full of light, full of air. But there is a peculiarity in this city. The city is at 3 levels. So the lowest level, and you can see that the buildings, multi-story buildings, are built on top of the canals. So the canals were for traffic of goods and transporting the passengers, so that there was no traffic whatsoever. They were also for irrigation. In fact, there were 2 levels canals. One was for the sewage, the other one was for the transport. Even devised stables with slopes so that the urine of the horses can flow into the canals. This was Leonardo. The second level was for the ordinary population, the shopkeepers, the commerce. The shopkeepers would have been living on top of the shop. That was the habit of the age. And then, at ground level, there were the residences for the citizens. And the streets, the width of the streets, at the same height as the palaces, which had different heights, because it was an answer to the plague. So the sun was needed, the air was needed, but in order to have the citizens also being protected from the sun and the rain, his palaces had porticos which were flanking the streets. You can see it again here. And Leonardo had a passion, particular passion for water in every possible form. So he wanted every piazza, every square, and a fountain, and also for stairs. So outside, the floors were connected by outside stairs. Inside, there were spiraling stairs, because he was so meticulous that he conceived spiraling stairs to prevent people, don't laugh, from urinating on the stairs. And then these stairs could connect down directly to the canal or to the intermediate layer with the shops. So, if you read the description that Roger gives, the first interview was in 1967 for Equal One. Then, with some changes, he repeated the interview for the Journal of Indian Architects in 1971. And the town that Roger describes is the town of Leonardo. So he wanted porticos, he wanted fountain with squares, he wanted street for human encounters. There is absolutely not one single car, as there is nothing with Leonardo. The canals are here, the traffic is here, there is nothing. And then the thing to me became obvious. Of course, Roger conceived a town like this, like Leonardo, because Leonardo was the first manifestation of Aurobindo. And there is a passage in this interview. Those who know Roger was mainly an artist. In fact, before becoming an architect, he was studying as a painter and a sculptor. But there is a passage in this interview where he talks like Leonardo, because this, in fact, is not the galaxy, it's the macrostructure. It's the second layer, 1967. Auroville was inaugurated with two postcards, the galaxy and the town of the future. And in that, Roger described these two macrostructures, which are underground. There are all these pipes and all these technical assets. And he said that these are fixed and cannot be touched. Then, upward, externally, you fix all the facade and then you change and you play endlessly. But underneath is that. I asked personally Roger, because that was my favorite plan. Why you change it with the galaxy? And he said, no, it was not the mother. The mother had approved it. I changed it because the two macrostructures would help at the site of Matrimandir. Anyhow, the fact remains that the mother had approved that. And that was the three-layer city of Leonardo. So this, to me, was the end of my research through this exhibition.